Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Rethinking the Sales Playbook, What Today's Sales Teams Actually Need. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand version will be shared with all registrants after the event. We encourage you to submit questions at any time using the chat feature. We'll address your questions as time permits. If we do not get to your question, we will reach out to you after the event. You can also access additional resources and helpful links through the event portal at any time. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's host, Glenn Haertel, Chief Revenue Officer at memoryBlue. Glenn is a seasoned sales executive with over 25 years of experience accelerating revenue growth and transforming businesses globally. He has deep expertise in sales training, revenue acceleration, and business transformation, and we are very excited to have him today. Glenn, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate the introduction. I'm very pleased to be joined today by a real professional and an expert in sales methodology, sales best practices, Mark Ward. Mark is the founder and CEO of RevenueArc. He's based in the UK since 2016. Prior to that, he led Damian Consulting, a sales consultancy headquartered in Cape Town, South Africa. For over 20 years, Mark has been advising private equity firms and their technology portfolio companies, as well as some other leading industry tech businesses on sales best practices. He's actually led sales transformations for global enterprises such as Lenovo and Infor, has supported a number of scale-ups and early stage high growth companies, and worked with some large consulting firms like Accenture, bringing a practitioner's precision to what truly drives scalable sales. I'm excited to have him join me in a conversation about what it takes to grow revenue in today's environment. Mark is also the creator of impact-centric selling and the author of Sales Turnaround, and that's a playbook for revenue performance that's currently in pre-publication. So welcome, Mark.
Hello, Glenn, and hello to all the listeners out there.
All right. Well, today's world, things are changing so fast, right? We got introduction of AI. You've got consumers that perform differently in the B2C world that are taking some of that knowledge or some of that expectation into the B2B world, right? And having a sales process today that really takes into consideration what the buyer needs in their decision journey is critical to today's success. And what we're hearing and what we're seeing is one size and one practice or one methodology doesn't seem to fit everybody. I'd love to get your takes on what you're seeing in market.
Yeah, well, exactly that. You're quite right. So we've designed sales operating blueprints and playbooks for many SaaS and tech companies over the years. And whilst there are always elements that overlap, each organization is unique, just like each individual is unique. And so you find that there are often really important distinctions and differences in those operating systems or playbooks or whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, each of these organizations has their own ICP, their own sales motions, and they're staffed by unique individuals. And so there needs to be a tweaking or a tailoring for the bespoke or the nuanced nature of those organizations.
Mm-hmm. Well, buyers are in today's world because of access to information, right? Mm-hmm. And before I go buy anything, I'm full of data that I'd never had before. So salespeople have a less opportunity to influence initial thought process. And how do you take into account all of what's available to the buyer prior to engagement from a sales force?
Yeah, I mean, the world certainly has changed, and I think the power dynamic has shifted enormously and continues to shift. And in some ways, salespeople just need sharper and better skills than ever before because they are just required to do more and more difficult things, which is to break through amidst a hailstorm of noise and there's all kinds of friction that stands in the way of actually getting to a buyer. And the fact that they are so heavily armed with all the information and data prior to typically engaging with a salesperson is one of many real disadvantages that the salesperson is now under. So yeah, it's a completely different world, to your point. And salespeople really have to up their game now if they're wanting to compete and thrive in this new world that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to meet buyers kind of where they are in their buyer journey, and figuring that out is key to being successful.
Yeah,
and being prepared for those initial conversations. So you've got today getting in touch with a buyer is harder than ever, and at a memoryBlue, that's all we do is in the top of the funnel is try to penetrate accounts and gain interest to move deals forward.
Yeah.
People aren't sitting in their office every day, right? We're seeing more trend back into office, but a lot of people work remote, work from home. You're not able to call a switchboard and get through to somebody's office and have an engagement. You have to find different ways, right? You got to leverage tools like LinkedIn or social media, email, mobile phones. What are you seeing?
So interesting. I was just thinking as you were speaking, I was thinking, when was the last time I phoned a reception to try and get through to a stakeholder, either a prospect or a project? And I'm really not exaggerating when I say it's probably about 8 or 9 years ago.
That's right.
So it's been an awfully long time. And so, yeah, I think to your point, to break through the noise and to access people when their attention span is so restricted, and there's just so much demand on their time. It's just it takes some special talent and skill and grit. And so yeah, and so I would think that individuals prospecting for new business probably have the hardest possible job, because it really does. It's extremely difficult to get through to those. If your prospect is somebody that and there's some sort of relationship, and there's some sort of trust built, then of course it's a completely different ballgame. But certainly if you're prospecting new clients, new logos, and new opportunities, it takes something quite special to break through, which is why I think you guys have a business, because a lot of organizations, frankly, get fatigued and discouraged and super despondent really quickly when trying something which is quite frankly so difficult.
Yeah, you're no question about it. I think one of the hardest jobs in sales is doing that early stage, top of funnel, getting that interest started. Yeah. If it's an inbound, that's a different story. But when we're talking about pure outbound, going after targeted accounts, that's a difficult challenge in today's world.
Yeah.
Once you get somebody, though, I'd love to talk through this a little bit. How important is it that the rep is prepared with relevant and insightful information for that initial conversation?
Well, I think if you're not adding value from the very, very first conversation, you really don't deserve a place on that call, because I think prospects have very little tolerance for somebody that wears a sales agenda on their sleeve and is not coming with any value. And so a salesperson needs to be hyper prepared, understand exactly who they're talking to, what are the KPIs and objectives of that person, what do they care about, what is the likely problem that they are sitting with. And then I always say, if I'm coaching a sales team, at least go in with a really strong, well thought out hypothesis that you can test in an early conversation, and do so in a way that adds value to your prospect. Don't just go there with some sort of blank slate thinking that that's going to be good enough, because it just never is. So buyers have a real expectation. You need to be on your A game. You need to be adding value right from the get-go. You need to be, be brief, be bright, and then be gone, as the saying goes.
I like that terminology. Be brief, be bright, and be gone. Right. So they're expecting you to bring that value, but do it in a concise format. Right.
Exactly.
So
right.
Hit the high points pretty quickly and move on, because everybody's busy. I think everybody we deal with in the sales cycle, and you probably too, that the pressure these sales leaders are on, or these executives that we may be selling into, it's immense, right? And their days are full. So you have to be spot on with the activity and your message.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're dealing today with a buying coalition. It's not like the old days where you could sell in a B2B environment, and you really only deal with one, maybe two people. Today there's a team, a coalition, a group, and sometimes in an enterprise environment, we've seen buying coalitions up to 18, 19, 20 people on a single deal, and they have vastly different objectives and requirements. Their agenda, there's often overlap. They want to get a deal over the line, but their agenda within that process is often very different. And salespeople have to understand who they're talking to, what the dynamic is in that buying team, and of course the messaging and the collateral, and everything needs to adapt depending on who you're talking to. And that degree of adaptation and agility, it just wasn't required 20 years ago. But today, if you're not good at that, you're dead in the water.
Right. So that's a great point. I've moved our slide to Rethinking Qualification, because that's such a critical part of what you just said. If you may have 10, 15, 20 decision makers or participants in that decision-making process that you have to be in tune with, right? And navigating through that is not easy, because there are going to be different biases and different agendas that you're going to have to manage as you go through. There are some great methodologies out there. You've got MEDDICC, you've got, solution selling, the complex sell, all kinds that have existed over time. But one of the most common today is MEDDICC. How do you see that fitting into the type of sell you just described?
I will be honest with you and say that I don't pull products off the shelf and try and make them fit into different environments. We create bespoke qualification methodologies that suit specific clients, their sales motion, the buying coalition that they're selling to, the sales cycle, et cetera, et cetera. So if you said to me, well, do I find value, say, for an example, in MEDDICC or MEDDICC, there's certainly value. A lot of those variables are timeless, and they won't go anywhere. But that said, a qualification tool like MEDDICC often is not right in every situation. I'll give you an example. We dealt with a client and their win rate was really low, and we tried to dig really deep as to why they were losing deals. And it turns out that they weren't taking the CTO or the CIO along in the journey. And so the deal would get quite mature, sort of late stage, and then the CTO or the CIO would come on and typically scupper those deals, because either they weren't satisfied or they thought they could build it themselves, or whatever the case may be. And so we changed that, that one very fundamental and important thing, where right from the get-go we began to engage either the CIO or the CTO, bring them along, build their confidence and trust, and the win rate almost doubled in that business. So now, if you look at MEDDICC and you look at the acronym, there's no place in which that points you to a technical buyer per se. Now, and it's an interesting wording, the idea of a static qualification framework, and it's an interesting one, because in some environments, as you know, the sales cycle can be pretty long. I did work for Lockheed Martin, and I asked the head of sales in the UK, what is your average sales cycle? And he looked at me with a deadpan face and said about 8 years. And that's the longest sales cycle I've ever encountered. But of course, that's Lockheed Martin. It's a completely different, very different. But in many SaaS environments, it's not uncommon for it to be 9 to 12 months, because it's really big purchases. And in some environments that I've worked in, like Accenture's BPO business, it can be even longer than that. The point being that over all of that time, so much changes on the buyer side. The people in the buying coalition change, the business dynamics change, all kinds of forces that impact that business that they themselves need to adapt to. And all of this is occurring whilst this deal is progressing through the pipeline. So I always say to salespeople, sales leaders or salespeople I'm working with, sometimes you've got to take one step forward and 2 steps back and go and re-qualify because of all the changes that has occurred. And so whatever methodology you use, whether it be MEDDICC or something designed bespoke like we do, you've got to build in a mechanism for dynamic qualification, which is responsive to change events. So I'll pause there.
No, that's a fantastic point. Things are changing super fast in this world. So if you have a 12-month sales cycle, as you mentioned, you may have different buyers that have come in to the business during that 12 months that are going to influence the outcome. You might have business conditions and environment has changed. That's going to change their priorities as an organization. So staying in tune and aligned with that is critical. Also, one of the things that MEDDICC doesn't really teach you, I think, is how to uncover where the influencers lie within the account, right? It does a great job of you identifying the hierarchies of the decision-making chain, but it's uncovering those people in the organization who have the true influence to help drive a deal to closure.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And so often you see people are just speaking to the wrong individual, assuming that my champion is also the advocate that's going to move the pieces internally, that's going to support me in driving consensus. And if that person is wrong, and you're placing your bets, if you'll forgive the expression, on the wrong horse, you're going to lose money. And so the more experience you get as a salesperson, the sharper one's intuition becomes around who is the real advocate and mobilizer. In fact, mobilizer is a better term, because that's the persona that I always look for. Who is the mobilizer amongst the buying coalition? The person that's going to drive the group to consensus, that's going to get stuff done, and that's going to bat for us in a really positive and proactive way.
So how do you find that person?
Well, that is a very good question, and it's a bit like, how do you find your ideal partner in life? Well, you've got to go on a number of dates, and ask a lot of questions. And so when I'm in a complex sales situation and I'm speaking, I'm always asking questions about who the other members of the buying coalition are, and then I'm always trying to build bridges to those people as soon as possible. So I'm not going to wait until late in the sales process to reach out to the economic buyer, for example, or the technical buyer, again, to use that as to use that example again. I'm going to build those bridges as early as possible, and once I've built the bridge, I'm again going to try and verify, is this the person that I'm looking for or not? And I'm also going to look at the signals, and I'm going to look at the behavior. If you've got somebody, if somebody's a true mobilizer, they're copying you on emails, they're forwarding your collateral, and you can really see that they're moving the machinery. And so over the time, one looks for the signals, and in that way you'd identify them.
Great. Okay. Super. I want to transition a little bit into how we're leveraging AI in all of this, right? AI in sales and sales development is critical for salespeople to understand, know how to leverage, right? And if I'm looking at AI overhaul, my perception of it is it's a great enabler, right? And it helps people be prepared, but it's not the answer to sales. It is a great tool that we need to know how to leverage.
Yeah, I think that I agree with most of that, but I would say that there's a big and I'll get to that in a bit. But if I look at all the different disciplines within the sales environment, whether it's prospecting or closing or asset creation, or whatever the discipline in the average sales or revenue engine, there are incredible AI tools that are now available to support all of those disciplines. And so it's actually it's a piece of research that I'm currently busy on at the moment. I'm trying to identify who are the leaders in each of these areas. And so where we stand, we're in July now, 2025. And I would say that what you've said is largely true. Right now, they are an enabler. They are a super valuable aid. They do amazing things to our productivity, et cetera. But as soon as you start to move into the area of agentic AI, agents, bots, managing bots, bots assimilating an enormous amount of data, interacting with a large language model, and then actually making decisions, running algorithms in there, and making decisions, you're then moving into an area where those agents or those bots are going to begin to replace human beings en masse. And so I think it's only a matter of time before you see in most organizations humans working alongside bots or agents. Now, again, depending on what sales environment you're working in, because if you're selling B2B, I think we are very, very far away from the day when your bots sell to that buying coalition that you and I just spoke about. It's just not going to happen. If you're selling a small product and it's highly commoditized, then I think the day is much closer. I'm quite curious to hear your perspective on this, but so again, smaller, more transactional, easy sales motion. I think that the threat of AI is much closer. The more complex that sales environment, the higher the stakes, the closer you start to move into sort of enterprise space, the further we are away from a robot ever replacing a human being, to take a sale, pretty far across the sales cycle. Do I ever think that I personally will be negotiating with a robot before I spend millions on on a piece of software or services? No, I can't see that happening, because I think trust is that key currency that is required before I trust you and I bet my career on you. Because again, if you're buying something and it's a high ticket item, there's a lot of career risk to that person, right, Glenn? And so trust is this incredibly valuable commodity. And I don't think robots are going to be building trust to that extent anytime soon. So, I mean, I could go off on a tangent, perhaps I already have, but I'll give you a chance to respond. I'm super curious to hear what you think about this.
No, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said there. For the super high transactional things, there will be a place for the AI and for the bots. But as you get into more complex sales and more stakeholders in a business, I just don't see it's there yet. And even in a lot of functions. But to your point, trust is critical, and the buyer experience, right? And I've had some situations and deals that have been involved in recently where you build that trust through that experience, right? It's that knowledge that you bring to the table when you're having the conversation, the ability to read tone and sentiment in what feedback you're getting, be able to pivot effectively. Bots can't do that today, right? And it's giving that really positive experience to the buyer that you understand their business, right? You've aligned to their needs, and they have a high level of confidence that you can deliver success for them. Glenn, you don't get that out of a transactional piece of technology.
You are so correct. I'm sitting with a deal at the moment where we're pitching for a large piece of transformation work for a SaaS company, and I think we're 5 proposals in, probably 10 meetings that we've had, like serious meetings, just trying to narrow the scope, define the scope, and get get the costs right. And now the SOW process begins, and that's going to go backwards and forwards. And there's just no world in which an AI bot is going to be able to do all of that. I can't see. I mean, everybody. Someone said to me in a conversation recently that there are always people holding up dominoes, saying, "Oh, AI will never do X, X, Y, and Z." And then he made the point. He said, "Eventually, every domino will fall." I just don't see that particular domino falling anytime soon because of the degree of complexity. If I, as a human being, am struggling so much to get this, deal over the line, there is absolutely no way a robot's going to be able to do it. I don't think in my lifetime. And I could be wrong, and that comment may age very, very badly, but I just don't see it happening. That's my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think AI though will play a more important role in sales every year going forward, every month almost, right? There's new technology, there's new insights that you can gain, intent data signals, right? Prepping for a call. There's so much you can do with AI to benefit the sales process and make your outcome more predictable and effective.
Yeah.
I do have a question that popped up in the chat. It says, we're talking about the AI and the bots. I think it prompted somebody to think there's a lot of talk about AI and bots taking over the sales and business development function. And I hear that too. That's the world I live in, right? So I'll address it first, and I would love to get your take on it. For some of the super transactional stuff, bots can help field some inbound inquiries on our website and do some of that. But taking things to the next level and securing, meaningful next steps is still best handled by human beings. And I look at some stats, and we ran some numbers recently for all the meetings we booked for our clients in 2024. And this stat carries forward into 2025. But we booked over 55,000 meetings that we've qualified meetings for our tech customers last year. And over 85%, just over like 85.1% were secured by a telephone call.
Yeah.
Not through an email or not through a website inquiry. It was through an actual conversation where we're able to connect with the person, verify the level of need or interest, and secure meaningful data points to take forward. You can't get that from a bot, right? Not yet today, right? So, and you're also in those conversations, you're able to listen intently, right? And you can interpret, resistance. You can interpret tone, inflection points, and be able to pivot conversations based upon the reading that you as a human can do that a bot can't.
Yeah. I couldn't have said that better. I couldn't have said that better. And if you move further into the funnel, and you start to do something like this, like qualification, and deep discovery work in a highly complex environment. Let's say you're selling software into a bank, and you've got to go in and do discovery, and it's best done in a workshop scenario where you've got a whole bunch of technical people as well as the commercial people, within that workshop. Yeah, and that discovery process is taking, it takes considerable skill and knowledge and finesse to be able to get that right. Mm-hmm. So that you can take what's learned in that discovery and you can shape the ideal proposal with the right sort of project scope, et cetera. And yeah, we're just nowhere near the day when a bot's going to sit in a room like that and do it for us.
Right. So I know we're running out of time here. There was a last question that popped up. It had to deal with leveraging AI in your conversations with your buyers. Yeah. And how do you use that and still have a collaborative sales process?
Well, if you're asking me personally, yes, I'm leaning very, very heavily on AI. Okay. Because again, I'm coming from a position of, if I'm not adding value from the very first engagement, then there's no reason for them to talk to me. And so I need to go to them with crisp and sharp insight. I need to tell them not only what they don't know, but I've got to share with them what they didn't know that they didn't know. And so
great point.
I need to constantly be on the pulse of the very, very best insights and information and data. And there's just no better place to find that than some of these AI tools available to us, frankly. So, yeah.
Well, fantastic. I think we're about out of time. What I wanted to do is give you a quick chance to say a little bit about your business.
Yes, cool. Well, we've grown up in the sales environment. We've grown up in the technology environment. And fundamentally, what we do is we assess sales organizations. Sometimes it's revenue organizations, and now it would include marketing, sales, and customer success. We run assessments and diagnostics, sometimes for private equity and other times just for CEOs. We figure out what is standing in the way of highest and best performance, and we build systems for scale. And so a lot of our clients come to us after an injection of growth capital, and they want to standardize and they want to put systems in place that can really scale growth, and that's what we've become, best at. And over the years, we've had an opportunity to work with many startups and early stage businesses, but we also know what good looks like, having worked with very large organizations like Accenture and a whole bunch of others. And so, that's Revenue Arc.
Very good. Some great brands you work with.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, just real quickly on memoryBlue. The way I like to describe our business is we're a revenue acceleration engine for our clients, right? The majority of what we do is we drive very high qualified opportunities for our customers that have a higher propensity to close. We do that globally in over 30 native languages with about 650 resources. Been doing this for over 23 years and have built a reputation of super high quality. If you go to the G2 website and see the rankings, you'll see that where we sit, super high scores because of the quality of the delivery. And very proud of our customers. We work with some of the best run businesses in the world, and like you, Mark, a lot of early stage private equity backed high growth businesses. All right.
Nice. Indeed, you guys are an impressive business.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and hopefully you took away some good insights from Mark.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Thanks for listening, and lovely chatting with you, Glenn.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.